Fuchsias have always been one of my summer patio favourites. Those hanging bells can be dainty and delicate, like the cascading salmon pink Patricia Hodge, or bold and blousy, like the huge frilly double flowers on trailing deep purple. And what a wide range of other colours, shapes and forms they come in too. Many, like Beacon, have that characteristic red and deep violet-pink combination. And these have become classics and firm favourites among fuchsia fans. Over the years, I've often planted the upright growing Beacon in a large patio pot, and being hardy, it's grown back year after year with little winter protection to produce bigger, bolder and more floriferous displays with every passing year. You'll be able to find out how I grow fuchsia Beacon through the seasons later in this video, starting with pruning in spring and running right through the gardening year. And I'll show you how easy it is to take cuttings from your fuchsias to propagate new plants for free, so keep watching. Now, specialist growers offer literally hundreds of varieties of fuchsia in shades of pink, salmon, red, magenta, violet, white, orange and more, so it's worth searching out mail order fuchsia nurseries to see what catches your eye. The hardy GERANIUMS is a classic that has been popular for many years. It's got an upright habit and double flowers with magenta rose petals, or corolla as they're called botanically, and pink sepals. And for this outstanding and reliable garden performance, the Royal Horticultural Society have given GERANIUMS an Award of Garden Merit. Bella Marisca is short, compact and very free flowering. I've grown it on my patio, and just look at those flower buds swelling up like balloons just before they burst open. This year I've also been growing its sister fuchsia, Bella Bianca, with its quite dwarf and upright habit, flowering all summer long with these lovely double pink flowers set off by their rosy red sepals. Falklands is also an upright variety with semi-double rose pink flowers, white flushed pink sepals and a tube. It's dainty and very pretty. Some fuchsias are almost blue in colour, like Mr. Blue Sky, a trailing variety that's great in baskets and window boxes, with stems up to a couple of feet long that are adorned with these fancy little flowers. Marinka has a trailing habit, great for baskets, producing lovely hanging red flowers all summer long. And Patricia Hodge is another trailer with a superb flowering performance. It remains compact and bushy right through the year, carrying a lovely display of flowers with salmon sepals and orangey pink corollas. Now, Pink Fizz offers you something a bit different. To start with, it's hardy, but this variety has been classed as a climbing fuchsia, with Thompson & Morgan describing it in their catalogue as the best climbing fuchsia you'll ever grow, with vigorous upright stems reaching up to 5 foot in height in the right conditions. If you've heard of a climbing fuchsia called Lady Boothby, then Pink Fizz is a huge improvement. It's best grown alongside a wall or a fence, or perhaps up the side of an arch or an obelisk. This variety is very free flowering, blooming from around June right through to November, and Thompson & Morgan claiming a single plant could produce over 2,000 flowers. Now, that's impressive. Double flowered fuchsias always look impressive too, like trailing Sarah Elisa that produces giant flowers with white and soft pink coloration that set off nicely against their dark green leaves. Sarah Elisa is a member of the Southern Bells fuchsia range, and another in that range is Bella Rosella, with these spectacular giant frilly double pink flowers, each measuring up to 4 inches across. Their flowers are packed with petals, each like a ballet dancer's tutu dress. If you want to create a spectacular display in a hanging basket, then these varieties or others in this range should certainly be on your list. Equally as impressive is the trailing dawn star that produces these really large ruffled double flowers in a very tasteful pale lavender colour, set off by their white sepals. Now this has only been a small selection of fuchsias to whet your appetite, and you'll find hundreds more available from the nurseries. Fuchsias don't just bloom once, as more flowers just keep coming. With their repeat flowering habit, as one flower fades, another is developing to replace it, and this cycle continues right through summer and autumn. Most fuchsias love a bright position, but they will tolerate some shade, and I've grown hanging baskets of fuchsias in quite shaded positions where they only receive direct sunshine right at the end of the afternoon. Fuchsias prefer a position where they're protected from those scorching, hot, sunny conditions at the very height of a summer's day, where an open site exposed to the harsh sun can even scorch their leaves, so choose their site carefully. Compost in pots and baskets will also dry out far quicker in hot sunshine, and if their compost dries out, the plants will wilt and suffer, losing their leaves and flowers. But fuchsia care is actually quite straightforward. All you need to do is provide regular watering and feeding, plus deadheading to remove faded flowers and seed heads, and later in this video I'll show you exactly how I do this to keep my displays looking glorious all summer long and keep the colour coming. And as well as colour, you can choose fuchsias that grow to different heights and sizes, and they have different growing habits too. So consider this when choosing fuchsias for different uses around your garden. Perhaps you want an upright growing or a bushy variety to grow in a patio pot or in a border. But for hanging baskets, choose trailing fuchsias, ones with arching stems. These can look lovely around the edge of a large pot, weeping over the sides, surrounding something tall and upright in the centre of the container. Combining fuchsias with other summer bedding plants will produce a spectacular display for patios, or perhaps, like here, on the front of a house, around a front door as a colourful and very warm welcome to all your visitors. Some fuchsias are hardier than others too, perhaps even hardy enough to leave outside all winter long, either growing in a border or in a pot, but many are tender and need to be grown in frost-free conditions. But even hardy ones can get waterlogged and wet if left outside, so they're better brought under cover. One of my neighbours had a bed by the footpath with a lovely hardy fuchsia lina. It has semi-double flowers with a lovely rosy magenta corolla surrounding these pollen-laden stamens poking through. The tube and sepals are a gorgeous pale pink. Fuchsia lina also has an award of garden merit. Another neighbour has a large and impressive plant that I think is Fuchsia Magellanica, variety Mollinii alba, white flowers. It's growing in their garden, so is fully hardy, and flowers start forming early summer and they continue well into autumn. Their shrub is probably 5 foot in height, but once established, after 5 or 6 years, it can be even taller, although very severe winters can knock it back a bit, so it needs pruning back harder in the spring. All my fuchsias are growing in pots, which I can bring under cover in the winter to protect them from both the cold and stop the compost from getting wet and waterlogged and their roots freezing solid. I just bring the pots into my unheated greenhouse, and as they lose their leaves, as we move into winter, they produce these dormant twiggy stems that don't require any watering at all through the winter. Just moisten their compost in spring and they'll soon burst into new leafy growth. But more of that in a minute. And one last colourful characteristic you may not have considered are fuchsia leaves. Although most varieties have plain green leaves, you can find fuchsias with variegated or even golden leaves, like Fuchsia Gold Rush Anna Silveria, with a simple small purple and pink flower set off by pale green leaves, each with a golden edge. Fuchsia Sunray has a variegated leaf with white edges, similar in many respects to Tom West, but several other variegated or colourful leaf varieties are available from specialist nurseries. On the whole, fuchsias are pretty trouble-free, but one proviso I will give you here is that there is a pest called vine weevil that loves eating fuchsias. So if, like me, your garden does have a resident population of vine weevil, then these pests can be very hard to eradicate. In fact, I've found you just have to live with them. During summer, you may spot the adult vine weevil beetles climbing up the stalks and over the leaves, which they can start eating. And although you might see them during the day, they usually come out at night, and these adults nibble around the edges of the green leaves. So be vigilant, and if you spot any, pick them off right away. But take your time when you do this, as vine weevil will drop off if disturbed, and they're really hard to spot once they've fallen down onto the compost or soil. I try and position one hand just below the vine weevil to catch it if it falls, picking it off with the other. So this really is a two-handed job. However, it's the vine weevil larvae that do most of the damage, unseen in the compost, eating away at the roots of the fuchsias, and many other plants come to that, like primulas, strawberries, cyclamen, begonias, and many other food plants in their wide and varied menu. There are pesticides that you can use to try and control them, but they're really expensive, and as an organic gardener, I prefer not to use them. You can water the compost with a biological control nematode like Nemesis that needs to be used during the warmer summer months. But again, this is really expensive and may need to be repeated every year to provide ongoing control. In this video, I'll take you through a full year and show you how I grow, care and nurture for some of my fuchsias. So let's start with a hardy fuchsia called Beacon that I planted in a patio pot, which was brought into my unheated greenhouse to protect it through the winter. And so let's run through a year in the life of my fuchsias, starting in my unheated greenhouse in the middle of spring. It's always a pleasure sharing my hints, tips, ideas and advice with everyone. So please give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button right away and subscribe to my gardening channel. There's plenty more videos on my channel for you to enjoy too. Fuchsias are a lovely flowering plant to have on your patios, and I've had this hardy variety called Beacon grown in a pot, flowered beautifully last summer, and I just left it in its pot over winter and it died down. I should have actually done this job a little while ago. These stems that developed last year need to be pruned away because I've already got, as we've moved through spring, the new shoots growing up from the base. The tops died down in the winter and they can be cut back to leave space for the new growth to develop. And so now is the time to cut away all of these old shoots, cutting them right the way back to the base, but not damaging the new growth which is growing up. So just get in with your secateurs and cut them back. If you want, you could just start by reducing the uppermost bits and just cut them back in stages so you can get in to see where the old shoot grows down to, and just cut these away. I've got some nice new shoots developing right down from the base. All of the top growth, although it's called a hardy fuchsia, all of this top growth was killed off in the winter. A little weed developing there as well. Get rid of any weeds you've got in the pots. I think this plant is in a big enough pot now, so I'm not going to pot it up this year. I'm going to grow it on in this pot for a second year, but it's now just time to remove all of these old woody bits and make space for the new shoots to develop. So now with all of those old woody bits cut away, I can see the shape of the new plant. Now, as it's growing in the pot, I'll need to feed it, so I'll start regular feeding probably every couple of weeks with a high potash food. Something like a tomato fertilizer is absolutely fine. Got lots of potash in it, which will encourage good flowering development, and I'll use this not only for my crops like tomatoes and cucumbers, but also for a lot of my flowering plants too. Then the other thing you've got to do, notice here how this main shoot is getting longer and longer. What I want from a potted fuchsia is a bushy plant with lots of shoots carrying lots of flowers. So what you can do as we move through spring into summer is to pinch. And what I mean by pinching is you take out the top of a shoot to encourage the side shoots to emerge from the leaf axils lower down. So on this main stem here, can you see how the main stem comes up, pair of leaves, and then the axil of each of the leaves joined to the main stem, we've got two new little shoots. Another pair of leaves higher up, new shoots. So if I take the tip of this shoot out and pinch out the tip, and I'm going to take this out, you can either do it with secateurs or you can pinch out with your fingers. If I take out the tip of the shoot like that, what that does is it removes a source of hormone which is produced in the tip of the shoot called auxin, and as that travels down the stem it stops the side shoots developing. If I take the tip out, now I'll encourage these side shoots developing. I can do the same with all of these other side shoots on my fuchsia. Here we are, we've got a shoot here, we've got, let me say, take two pairs of leaves up the stem, and I'm going to take the tip out, and this will encourage the side shoots to develop. Do the same here, take the tip of that shoot out, and around here again I've got one pair of leaves lower down, second one, take out the tip. And if you do this all around your fuchsias at this time of year, so as I say, as we're moving through spring into summer, this will encourage the side shoots to develop. More stems will carry more flowers. Now that pinching out these shoot tips like this will delay flowering for a little bit because I've got to wait till these new side shoots develop to carry flowers. But by pinching once, maybe twice, I'll encourage bushier growth, more stems, more flowers through the summer. This is something to do on all of your fuchsias as we were in springtime, moving into summer, pinching to promote bushy, well-rounded, well-formed plants and promote better flowering over the summer months. Over the following weeks, the new shoots will surge upwards. If you want, you could pinch out the tips of these still further to encourage more bushy growth. This is quite an upright variety of fuchsia called Beacon, and I wanted to form some good upright stems. If I pinch out now as we're moving into early summer, I will delay flowering by a few weeks. So if you want early flowers, probably just give plants a one pinch, maybe two pinches from early on in the year. Otherwise wait, and I've already got some little flowers starting to form at the tips of these shoots. So I'm not going to pinch these out anymore. I'm going to enjoy these, and I'll have flowers hopefully in June and then through July and the summer onwards. I'm not going to waste these little fuchsia tips that I removed when I was helping the plants to bush out. I'm going to use these as cuttings, and all you've got to do really when you're preparing a cutting is, I get my little knife here, is just cut below the leaf joint at the bottom. Just remove the lower leaves of these cuttings. Sharp knife is important just to get rid of those or any little new shoots which are developing. If you want, put the cutting down on the work surface, just cut those off, so that I've now produced a little cutting only an inch or so long, pruned at the bottom, leaves and the shoot tip intact. Now what I'm going to do is to dip the base of this cutting in some hormone rooting gel. You can get powders and gels from garden centres, and I'm going to use this gel just to dip the base of the cutting in, and the hormone in that will encourage hopefully roots to develop. And you can just make a little hole in the compost, just big enough to put that in, pop the cutting in and just push the compost back around the roots themselves. So we got a second one here, as they cut below the leaf node at the bottom, trim off those bottom two leaves, tiny little cuttings. I know, dip the base in a hormone rooting powder, and I'm going to put several in this pot They might not all root, but hopefully some of them will. Just firm the compost around those, and hopefully I'll have some new fuchsia beacons to plant out in the garden. Just worth doing this every year, just propagating a few new plants, because you never know when that parent plant will succumb to winter cold or disease or something else. So just put that in there. I think I've got space for a couple more in here. So all of these I'm going to put in the pot, cutting neatly below a leaf joint. Nice neat cuts to remove the leaves. Dip it in hormone rooting gel and put that in there. So once the rootings are taken, I'm going to just give this a little bit of water now, just to settle the compost around the cuttings. And once it's watered, I can put a bag over the top. And the reason I'm doing this is to stop the cuttings drying out. This produces just a nice little sort of mini greenhouse around the cuttings themselves. If you find the bags are flopping, you can get a little cane or a stick and put that inside just to hold the bag up. Usually if I'm just putting the bag around, and then just get yourself an old rubber band which you can put around the base just to hold that in place. And there we are, some little fuchsia cuttings taken. So we'll come back in a few weeks and just see how those are doing. It's been about 8 weeks now since I took my fuchsia cuttings. I've kept them under that little poly bag to provide a little mini greenhouse, and they have produced some really nice strong cuttings. I did check the bottom of the pot for signs of roots, couldn't see any white roots coming out, but I think these are nicely rooted now and are ready to pot on to the next stage. So just very gently tease the pot off, and yes, I've got some really nice roots developing on those cuttings now, and the shoots are coming up and they're starting to develop really nicely. So the job now is just to tease this root ball apart into individual cuttings. Be very gentle as you work through just teasing those roots apart. Try not to damage them, but there'll be a little bit of damage as you pull each of the cuttings apart. Just do it in stages, gently pulling, easing each of the cuttings away, so each will have its own little root ball of compost. So it's the first one done, ready for potting on. I can get a little 3-inch pot now, put a little bit of multi-purpose compost in the bottom, tease the cutting down into place so it's nice centrally positioned, get a level, about level as it was in its pot before, and now filling around with some more compost. Just dribble the compost down around the root ball, filling in all the way round, keeping the cutting at the right height that you want it, and making sure all of those roots are nicely covered with compost. Firm it down very gently with your fingertips, and there it is. Tap it and the cutting is ready for watering in. And I'd go on growing these on in their small pots until they're nicely rooted, and then you can pot them up into a slightly bigger pot. Now for the next cutting, again, a little bit of compost in the base of the pot. Take the rooted cutting, pop it down centrally, fill in around with some of the compost, just dribble it down around the edges to make sure all of those roots are nicely covered. And once you've got up to the rim of the little pot itself, then you can just use your fingertips just to gently push that compost down around the roots. Now you're ready for watering. I usually water from the top to start with to settle the compost down around the root ball itself. Dribble a little bit of water down into the top of each pot. That's all you need to do just to settle the compost down, and then I'll probably leave the pot standing in some water in the base of the tray. But these cuttings have got 3 or 4 pairs of leaves on them, and by taking out the tip of each of those shoots, you can encourage those side shoots lower down to grow out. So pinch out the very tip of the shoot, just remove it so that lower down the stem in each of those leaf joints, the new side shoots can start growing out. So that one has had the tip pinched out. And now let's have a look at this one. Yes, again, I've got several pairs of leaves growing up the stem. Each of those has got a little side shoot raring to grow in the axil of the leaf. So pinch out the tip of the shoot. And again, that will encourage the side shoots to grow out to produce bushier plants, bushier growth, carrying more blooms. Last one here, little side shoots are growing out, pinch out the tip to encourage your fuchsias to bush out into nice bushy plants. And as you move through summer, those shoots get taller and taller, and at the tips of every shoot you'll be getting some beautiful flowers developing. The first ones to develop being further down the stem. The blooms are open at the tip, lots of new buds still forming, which shows you that a plant like a fuchsia will flower week after week after week, producing a continuous display which should keep going well into autumn. You'll also start finding some little tiny side shoots developing, and these too can carry flowers. So as we said earlier on in the season, by pinching out you produce more shoots. Every shoot will carry more flowers, and even these main shoots start producing side shoots further down which carry more flowers too. Now as a gardener, there's a couple of things you've got to do during the summer. One is deadheading. Now as the old flowers fade, let's have a look and see if we find some down here now. Got some old flowers here, like here, just starting to fade. Sometimes the old blooms will just fall away into your hand. Sometimes the petals will fall off, but they'll leave a little tiny fuchsia fruit developing. They don't add really any ornamental value to the plant, but they can be sapping the plant of its strength. So I think it's best to deadhead, to not only remove the petals in a flower, but also to stop those seed heads from forming, because you want more energy to go into producing more flowers. So as we've come through summer, that pinching out the tips of the shoots has stopped. That's something to do only early on in the season, pinching to produce more side shoots, encouraging those side shoots to develop out and produce a lovely framework to your fuchsia. But by stopping the pinching, the shoots that do develop will start forming the flower buds, and that's really what you want from summer onwards. So pinching is something to do earlier in the season. From then on, enjoy the flowers and just pick off the old faded flowers. If they don't come away too easily in your hand, then just get yourself something like a pair of scissors and just snip through the stalk itself just to cut them away neatly. Sometimes if you just try and pull the flowers off, you can actually snap the shoots. So either just try and get the flower between your finger and thumb so that you can really get to grips with it and pull it off and cut through it with your thumbnail. But otherwise, get yourself your scissors and just use those to trim away the faded flowers. Take care not to cut through the main stems themselves, just remove those faded blooms. Tidies up the display, stops those faded flowers from just falling down and lying on the petals themselves, because sometimes even that can cause the leaves to start developing brown patches and start to die. Tidies up the whole display. So you might notice that as the flowers fade, they can start developing some little discolorations and markings on them, perhaps particularly after rain. So these might look fine still, but if you're worried about the look of them and you just want to tidy them up and just leave space for these new flowers at the tips of the shoots to develop, then pick those off. But here we've got some faded flowers. Again, these need to be pinched off and cut away, so either use your finger and thumb just to get through those and remove them completely, or you can use some scissors to snip them off. Whatever, you just want to remove all of these faded blooms promptly, because the earlier you do that, the quicker these new flower buds, the tips of the shoots, will develop. And this is also something I sometimes do before I go on holiday. So if you're going to go away for a week or even 2 weeks before you go on holiday, it's worth going over the whole plant and removing all the fully open flowers, just leaving the flower buds. Because while you're away on holiday, these flowers will fully open, they'll fade, they'll start forming seed heads. So before you go on holiday, remove every open bloom on a shoot, just leaving the buds. Then while you're away on holiday, these buds will develop, then they'll start to open, and when you get back from your holiday, these will be open to give you a lovely display of blooms. So the last thing to do before you go away on holiday, all open blooms, remove those completely, just leaving the flower buds developing at the tip. And that's a good way to stop all of these flowers from fading and falling while you're away, destroying the lovely display, keeping things looking neat before you go away, and giving you the welcome flowers from your return. Now, as well as faded flowers, you might find some of the leaves, some stems, start to yellow, and these can just be picked off and pulled away just to keep the plant looking neat and tidy. So as well as deadheading today, and I'll go over the whole plant, picking off any of the faded blooms, fuchsias need that regular summer care, as do all plants going in patio pots and containers, and that's water and feed. So water regularly, possibly every day during the height of summer. Now this plant is growing in a terracotta pot, and I do find that terracotta dries out very, very quickly. Sometimes I actually line the inside of the pot with a piece of old compost bag of polythene before I fill with compost, and that can prevent so much moisture being lost through the sides of the pot. Otherwise, plants growing in terracotta pots can dry out more quickly. The compost in those pots loses more moisture. It's up to you to keep the plant watered. I always water from above and let that water soak down through the compost. And you might notice the water starting to fill up the saucer at the bottom, but I do always make sure I leave that saucer topped up with moisture so that there's an extra reservoir of water for the pot to take up during the day. And that's a good visual sign actually. If you go out onto your patio during the day, you can just keep an eye on that saucer, and if you notice that that water level has dropped, you know that the plant pot is taking up more moisture and it might need to be topped up again. So if you are home, you can get out and just put some more water either from the top to soak down or in the saucer at the bottom to top up that reservoir. Now the other thing plants need for healthy growth is food. I do often mix in some slow release fertilizer granules into the compost at planting time. If you haven't, then the compost in that pot can run out of nutrients within just a few weeks of planting. So it's up to you as the gardener to provide more nutrition through the summer. And I'm a great fan of just using one of these high potash tomato type fertilizers around the garden. Use it for my tomatoes or for my crops. The potash is used by the plants to produce the flowers and fruits. So you can use this on your flowering plants as well as on your crops. A tomato fertilizer is certainly something to worth having in your shed so that you've always got some ready to use. And this is a liquid formulation, so I can just add some to my water, and then perhaps once a week I will water my fuchsias and my other flowering plants, my hanging baskets, my begonias, my pelargoniums and other things with a solution of high potash liquid feed. That provides the potash that the plants need to produce more flowers. And it's got a balance of other nutrients in it. It's got the nitrogen to give you good leafy growth. It's got the phosphates to encourage the good roots, but basically it's that high potash you need to make sure you keep the flowering display going right the way through until autumn. Now, although this fuchsia beacon is a hardy variety, I do tend to give my plants some winter protection. So I will move this pot into my greenhouse. In the late autumn time, I'll reduce the watering down and let the compost dry out a bit. The plant will finish flowering, it will drop all of its leaves, and in the winter you'll just be left with a bit of a sticky mess. I mean sticky mess in terms of little sticks and the branches and the stems of the fuchsias, that's absolutely fine. The plant's gone dormant, doesn't need its leaves through the winter. The flowering display is finished, and then the cycle will start again next spring, when I will wait for the new growth to start. I will prune away any woody stems that aren't needed, that have died back, which aren't adding to the main framework of the fuchsia plant itself, and the new growth will come out. And once again, I'll be looking at those shoots, pinching some of them back, promoting more branching, and encouraging a lovely flower display to enjoy for another year. And do you remember the little fuchsia cuttings we took at the beginning of the year when we pinched off the side shoots to encourage our parent plant to produce more stems? Well, I've now got 6 beautiful little fuchsia plants. This one is already coming into flower, and these plants can be grown on through the summer. I'm probably going to leave them in this size pot for the rest of the year now. I don't think that I'm going to pot these up again. I'm going to keep them in these pots and overwinter them in these pots, and then I can pot them up next spring. But I've got a nice collection of new plants for free. I'm going to just leave these as they are this year because I'm not using these for flower display around the garden, so I'm not going to pinch the shoots out at all. I'm just going to let them develop as they are. This one, I'll just enjoy the flowers that it is producing, and most of these others are starting to make some little flowers at the tips of the shoots, but I'm going to just let these grow, keep them watered, keep them fed, build up the strength of the plant, develop a decent root system, overwinter these. You can just keep them ticking over if you want in a bedroom on a windowsill, but otherwise you can just let them go dormant as you do the parent plant. Start watering in the spring. Some of the old stems will die back a bit, prune them back, encourage new growth from the base, and next year I'll have some lovely healthy little fuchsias to pot up and create a new display, or perhaps even, if I'm generous, give some of these away to my friends.